Welcome to a story that doesn't need grand declarations or spoken vows, a love that lives quietly in the spaces between heartbeats. This is not a tale of words but of glances, not of confessions but of unspoken truth. When Sheikh Hamdan looked at her, the world did not hear his love, it felt it. His silence was not emptiness, it was poetry written in the language of the soul. He didn't need to say her name, his eyes had already written it across the horizon of forever. There are loves that speak loudly, and then there are loves that whisper so softly the heavens must lean closer to listen. His was the latter. In a world filled with applause and noise, he found peace only in her presence. The way she moved, the way the light curved around her, everything about her quieted the storms inside him. And though the world expected the prince to speak, the poet in him knew that love this deep could only exist in silence. Every time their paths crossed, the air around them changed, as though even time paused, afraid to interrupt what it didn't understand. His eyes followed her not out of possession, but devotion. They carried verses he could never recite, prayers he could never utter aloud. When she smiled, it wasn't just her lips that moved, it was his whole being that responded, silently surrendering to the pull of a love he dared not disturb. He loved her in ways that defied expression. No grand gestures, no loud proclamations, just presence. When she entered the room, his gaze softened, his heartbeat steadied, and everything else faded into insignificance. People spoke around him, the world spun on, but he only saw her, like a poet lost in the single word that defines his existence. In public, his face remained composed, regal, untouchable. But those who looked closely could see it, the flicker in his eyes, the tenderness that could not be disguised. It was as if the desert itself had taught him restraint, and the stars had taught him how to love without speaking. She never needed him to say anything, she understood. That was their secret, a love held in silence, too sacred for sound. There were nights when he stood on his balcony, the city lights shimmering below, and he thought of her, not with longing, but with gratitude. Her memory moved through him like music with no notes, a rhythm only the heart could hear. His poetry became a vessel for the things he could not say. Each verse carried her essence, wrapped in metaphors, hidden between sighs and moonlight. He once wrote, "The eyes remember what the lips forget," and perhaps that was his truth. His gaze carried centuries of devotion, each glance a confession the world could never overhear. Sometimes she caught that look, and in that single exchange, they said everything that love ever needed to say. No words, no promises, just understanding deeper than eternity. Their silence was not emptiness, it was connection. When he passed her in the corridors, a heartbeat lingered between them, fragile, powerful, eternal. Every time he looked at her, she felt something shift in the universe, as if destiny itself paused to take a breath. They didn't need to speak because their souls were already in conversation, a quiet dialogue written in glances, echoing across lifetimes. He never wanted to cage her with words, he wanted her to feel free in his love. And so he loved her like the wind loves the dunes, unseen, yet shaping everything. His affection lived in the small things, the way he remembered her favorite scent, the way he looked for her reflection in moonlit glass, the way his poetry spoke of a soul that everyone knew, but he never named. Sometimes, it feels as if Sheikh Hamdan doesn't write his poetry, it writes him. His pen becomes an extension of his soul, capturing emotions too vast to contain. He doesn't merely express love, she became the pulse behind his poems, the silence between his words, the reason his verses lingered long after the last line ended. Those who read his poetry felt something sacred in it, a love too pure for names, too eternal for endings. And though the world wondered who she was, he kept her identity hidden in his heart, safe from the noise of fate.
There are moments, even now, when the world grows still around him, when the laughter fades, and the only sound that remains is the quiet echo of his own heartbeat. It's in those moments that he feels her most. Not as a memory, not as a shadow of the past, but as a living presence that breathes through the silence. His eyes, though calm and steady before others, hold a softness that only she could summon, a reflection of a love that never had to be spoken to be eternal. Sometimes, when the desert night wraps the world in its cool embrace, he rides beneath the stars, the wind brushing against his face like her gentle touch. The moon glows brighter when he looks up, as if it too remembers the way she used to smile. The dunes shift and shimmer, carrying whispers of her laughter. And in the quiet rhythm of hooves against sand, he feels her heartbeat align with his own, reminding him that love this pure cannot be confined by distance or time. He preserves it, as if each verse is a sanctuary where feeling can live forever. Millions read his words and feel their hearts soften, as though they've stumbled upon something sacred, something the world had forgotten how to feel. He writes still, not for the world, but for her. The ink flows like the sands of memory, soft and endless. Each poem he pens becomes a letter sent to the heavens, a quiet confession that only the stars can deliver. His verses don't call her by name, yet every reader feels her presence, the muse whose silence inspired eternity. His poetry is not a declaration, it is a prayer, and she is the answer that lingers at the edge of every line. There are eyes that see beauty, and there are eyes that recognize the soul, his were the latter. To him, she was not just a woman, she was the meaning behind existence itself. He saw in her the reflection of every sunset he ever loved, every dawn that ever promised hope. She became the horizon his heart never stopped chasing, the unseen melody behind the stillness of his days. Even when she was far, his eyes carried her like light carries warmth, quietly, faithfully, endlessly. He carried her name not on his tongue, but in his pulse. Each heartbeat echoed with her memory, each sigh with her presence. And even though the world saw him as a prince, a writer, a leader, inside, he was simply a man who loved once, deeply, silently, endlessly. His silence wasn't emptiness, it was devotion too vast for language. Sometimes, when loneliness whispered through the palace walls, he would close his eyes and see her again, standing in sunlight, eyes filled with quiet grace. He didn't need to reach for her, she was already there, within him. As the years passed,